Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband, Jim. It is Sunday evening, and we are going to talk about artificial intelligence.
Except it's not Sunday.
You didn't have to tell them that.
Well, it's Monday. Oh, hold on. Why did we miss Sunday? Because why?
I don't know. What did we miss Sunday? We missed Sunday because I wasn't feeling good.
You weren't feeling good, so we decided to push it till Monday, which is okay. It's okay. We can be a day late. It's not a big deal.
So it's Monday evening because Jim had to call me out on that.
Well, yeah.
And we are going to talk about artificial intelligence for a little bit. So now, one of the things that I did notice about the articles and the stuff that you've collected that you wanted to talk about is that it's a little negative.
It can be. It depends on how you look at it. But we'll talk a little bit about, at the end of it, why I kind of went a little bit. I've been a whole lot more negative. I didn't go dark negative. I just went a little negative. But I kind of broke it up into non-education and education headlines this week.
All right, let's start with non-education.
I tried the new ChatGPT search. Now, if you have the premium version, it's already in the web part. You can just say /search and it'll come up. I don't even think you have to say /search anymore. I think you can just say search. But
and at the bottom of the premium version, there's a little
globe
icon globe.
It looks like a globe.
The World Wide Web. Yeah.
Yes, you can click on that. It's search. For when they first came out with it, you had to do a /search. I think you just click on the globe now and it puts it in there for you automatically. However, for some of us, they released an extension that you could put into Chrome, and which I tested it, and it basically takes over. It gets rid of Google as your default search tool in Chrome, which I didn't even think was possible, but it gets rid of Google and it becomes your default search. I tested it. It works pretty well. I like it. It puts you in the same window as ChatGPT, but it puts on the right-hand column.
So they got like panes.
They've got different panes. They've always had the left column, which shows you your threads.
Right.
They got the middle, which is the actual conversation you're having right now. But now the right-hand side, it showed you where it gets the information. So it's in a sense like Google, where you type in something and it gives you all the different links to things, except it synthesizes what it thinks is an answer. And then that's supposed to represent where you get it from. It's kind of like Perplexity. I used it. It was pretty good. The problem is that I'm only allowed to use it when I'm logged in to my personal Gmail, because I've had that account since ChatGPT started. So I tend to get pre-releases on stuff. And I do so much with Google Tools. It's very inconvenient
to go back and forth.
The dot box disappeared. The search tool disappeared. Everything Google disappeared.
So you could still drive or get.
You could still get to them, but you had to go to them specifically.
Complicated.
It's just an extra step that I didn't want to do.
So you deleted it.
I tested it for a day and then I deleted it.
Okay.
Well, I didn't delete it. Well, I turned off the extension.
Right. Well, that's what I meant. You're no longer using the extension.
Right. Now, the next search, I told you about it, which you've already used.
Yes.
So why don't you tell me about the next one? And what did you think of it?
The search inside of ChatGPT, I really like it, actually.
Not the search, web search. I'm talking about the thread search.
Oh, yeah. So it is literally the magnifying glass that's at the very top of the threads. And you can go in and you click on that. And then all you have to do is like type in a word that is part of what you think the title might have been, which again, it really makes me think about what I am titling my threads. It'll pick a title for you automatically. And yeah, it'll search the threads. I can type in a few words and it'll look
the fact that it'll search by subject through the threads, the title, I agree with you that I have started changing the titles instead of the default titles as well.
Right.
But I know that I talked about it with something at some point in the past. And when I go to find it, I can't. And I'm scrolling down through page after page after page.
Oh, it's annoying. Okay, so this happened to me the other day. It told me I was out of memory.
I've never done that. I've had this thing since they started it. I've never ran it. I don't know what you do.
Well, I don't know, but it was like.
But I do go through and delete.
So I had to say manage memory. No, it wasn't like it was out of room on the thread. You know how whenever you type in something.
No, I go delete threads every once in a while.
you go to type in something and it says memory updated. And it's like when you're talking about things that you're wanting it to continue in the tone of voice that you normally use, or you want it to remember that you're an educator, or I want it to remember that you're an engineer. And it's been trained on all the stuff about me. And so the memory was full. So I had to like click on manage memory. And then I was able to go in and say, like, one thing it said was, I had put in some lab results to ask for a question. And it said, your lab result showed this. Well, I doesn't need to remember that anymore. So I X'd out. So you can forget
that's
that
different
about
than I've never ran into that.
It was
weird.
It was weird. But anyway.
I do like the new search. I do like the ChatGPT search. What I like the most is that even though it's a long haul, somebody needs to push Google. Google has gotten so complacent that they don't even care now that the first page of your Google search is nothing but ads. They don't care.
Yeah.
Because they're the king.
Right.
And Perplexity is tiny. ChatGPT is well funded, or OpenAI is well funded. They just raised like $100 billion valuation or something. Anyway, somebody needs to challenge them, and I hope they do.
Yeah. And these competition.
I do.
It's gotten to the point now, whenever we would do trainings and we would make a comment about, how many of you guys automatically go to the 5th or 6th page of Google search, at the bottom where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many of you just automatically go to number 4 or 5? Most people don't. They
Except you almost have to.
But now you almost have to.
There's so many ads.
I am now getting to the point where I don't even look at the first page because I know that it's going to be sponsored. And so I go to that page with you almost immediately.
Yeah, I go to the bottom of page 1.
Yeah.
Pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
I've also got that synthesized, they've got the thing where it'll try to synthesize an answer. Mm-hmm. Except most of the time it's so bad.
Okay, so let's talk for a second we talked about Anthropic. And before
the new feature they added to Claude, which was to allow you to do some level of computer control stuff. And then, Microsoft had Replay, which was kind of like that. Mm-hmm. Now Google is mostly browser-based, but they're calling it Operation Jarvis, I think.
Project Jarvis,
sorry.
And they're taking over. They're wanting you to give it control of your.
At least at a browser level, all these companies now have come to the realization that one of the reasons people aren't adopting AI very fast is because it's a one-off. You have to go somewhere,
right?
And they're trying to see if they can shift people away from the chat paradigm, the chatbot paradigm, which is what people have already gotten used to. To do that means you've got to have the computer itself has to be more interactive. And that is troubling to me that they already have so much information about us as it is. It's a little worrisome to me that they will get more. So I'm not sure I'm much into that. So anyway, but everybody wants to. We've got Microsoft, we got Anthropic. We're doing our own version of that.
Yes.
Locally controlled. We'll talk about that in a minute.
So for education stuff, let's talk about education and artificial intelligence.
I put this one in there just for you, but I wanted you to kind of take a different take on it.
Yeah. So we talked about it last time. It's the thing that's happening in, yes, I mispronounced it, Massachusetts.
No, I think that's right.
Was that good?
I think you did.
So the family that is suing because they say that their student used artificial intelligence, they admit to the fact that he used artificial intelligence to help him with his work, but they say that the policies were not clear enough for him to not understand that it was not okay for him to do so.
Well, first of all, his initial claim was that they used it for research only.
And
but I read the article. The teacher did a lot more, according to the article I read, than they initially claimed, because the teacher actually did what's one of the pieces of the almost very first piece of advice you gave people in our process.
Let them know that you know.
Okay. I don't mean the first linearly in there. I mean, one of the first pieces of advice you gave people, you said, turn on what?
Oh, history.
Exactly. That teacher did that.
Yeah, if you're in Google,
And guess what she saw?
That they were copying and pasting.
It was large chunks being pasted in. So their argument that they did it for research purposes, if that's true, and that teacher had turned that on and looked at it, like she did like a replay kind of thing, and she could see where they were pasting chunks in. So that, you know what?
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, that wasn't the point of this. That wasn't the point of the article. Yes.
It's one of the things that and we've told our superintendent and assistant superintendent and everything else at our district. It's like, look, here's what you need to put into the handbook. Well, right now, the attorneys are saying, well, that's a little overkill. All you really need to do is put in these 2 sentences. And we're like, it's better to do overkill when it comes to your
It's
AI
not overkill
policy.
anyway. Who's going to know more about this? The people who've been doing it night and day, or technology people, or the lawyers. The lawyers always default to, it's funny because they act like they default to less is more until you see one of the contracts that they put together.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there's 25 pages of saying nothing. But I used to deal with contract law a lot because I worked for a company that did biometrics, and I read a lot of contracts. And lawyers tend to copy paste out of other contracts. So the problem with AI is they don't have anything to copy paste out of.
Right. It's all new.
So they don't want to put anything in there. They're waiting for somebody else to set the legal precedents so they can then copy paste it in and say, this should be your policy. So maybe stuff like this will allow us to actually put in our own handbook what we think ought to be in there versus what's in there. Because I think what we have in there is too lightweight.
I sent the article to the assistant superintendent. I was like, hey, there you go. This is what it needs to be.
Anyway, so this kind of led from the article I thought you'd be interested in, because I knew you'd want to do a follow-up. But I think that last sentence, just to reemphasize with it, what I wanted us to get out of this was
that the educators may need to rethink their approach to teaching and assessment in the age of AI. And you need to focus more on the actual learning process rather than just the final product that they're giving.
And to me, part of that is, I think that test-taking mentality that has been beat into teachers' brains.
Well, they don't have a choice.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
What I talk about all the time. Until we are willing to say, all right, we're done. No more high-stakes testing. You have to pass X number of exams if you're in high school or whatever to get out.
You have multi-level assessments, but you don't have high-stakes exams. You
don't have like one at the end of the year. I love the way that one of our children did it one time. They came in and they were like, okay, here's the STAR test. If I can pass everything on the STAR test right now, why do I have to take that grade level?
That was me. I asked a counselor that because that was before I was working at the school district. Our oldest son was the test-taking kid. I mean, the kid could take tests.
Yes.
And I was not happy with some of the ways they were doing things in terms of their GT kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I was also unhappy with the testing. And I said, this makes no sense to me. Why is it that you tell him at the end of the year, you have to pass a test to get out of the class? And if you don't pass the test, you can't move on. Mm-hmm. So to me, now it's a CLEP test,
right?
Which means if I can pass it right now, I get to skip the class. Because it's the ultimate assessment.
Right.
She did not appreciate my logic at all.
I'm amazed.
Isn't that weird?
That's very strange.
Because I was very linear about it.
But it does make sense to me.
It does. It's a CLEP test.
It's a CLEP test, basically. And until we're willing to step back and say, all right, teachers, you're not going to be held accountable to this very specific high-stakes test that we're going to make you teach to. And that's what your funding is dependent upon. And that's what it's not going to happen. So telling teachers that they need to rethink their approach to teaching, the teacher is sitting here and going,
okay,
if I rethink my approach and my kids fail the STAR test, I'm going to get moved to a non-testing grade level, or I'm going to get, I'm going to get,
and there's people out there in our government that are trying to attach their pay to it.
Right.
To where you get paid based on how well they do on the test.
So
they're using this assembly, teach the kids to work on the assembly line process where they have a clearly delineated output.
Yes.
When you put in all these parts, out pops a car on the other end of the assembly line.
Well, now we have a factory
Now they're trying to say, let's put in all this educational stuff and out pops
a factory worker.
Well, not just a factory worker. Out pops an educated kid. But the definition of educated means, how do we assess that? We assess that by making them take a test. It all sounds logical, except these are human beings.
Right.
These are not cars running down an assembly line that are being assembled. But I don't see that changing, because nobody has a better way to assess at the end whether or not they've learned anything.
I agree.
And I remember when I went through school, that the whole concept of the teachers teaching their love lessons and what they like to teach and ignoring other stuff, that was a real thing.
It was a real thing. And I can remember on Mondays, most of the lesson was about what happened at the Friday night football game.
Yes.
We could get 10 extra points on quiz if I knew what the score was on Friday night. I
used to love sitting. I had an algebra teacher that our math lesson was to use the stopwatch during track season and time the people as they ran around the track. And we got a test grade for sitting out there timing kids.
So in the 80s, before high stakes testing really became a thing, it was the pendulum had swung to that degree to where literally you were not in class, you were not learning, you were doing a stopwatch.
I was learning how to operate a stopwatch.
You know what I'm saying. So what did we do? We took a system, decided to fix it, and swung it all the way the other direction.
Went too far.
Unfortunately,
and we're not swinging back.
The other direction is going to be a whole lot harder to swing back, because the other direction has a lot of money tied to it.
Testing is big business. Ask Pearson. Yeah, they make billions on it.
Big business.
Anyway, moving on. I thought the next article was logical sense in terms of the order. I thought the education department releases new AI toolkit for schools. We've expected that for a while. They've been doing surveys forever, so they release it. That wasn't what was interesting to me about this.
The analysis that they
What was interesting to me was the analysis, as you just said, that they did and what they discovered.
Yes. So
and something you and I have talked about many times too.
1/3 of the 40 early adopting districts that they've talked to, they have publicly available AI guidelines. So 1/3 of 40, which isn't a lot. It's like, 12 and a half, or I don't know, 1/3 of 40.
There's that math again. You did your math in the 80s. I need a stopwatch. You did your math in the 80s.
Only 1/3 have something.
What I thought was interesting was, out of the 231 districts that another survey did, 5% had implemented specific policies for student use. 5%.
That's not a lot.
That's a small number.
Well, 10% of that number is 23.
Yes, so half of that.
So half of that is, again, 11 and a half or 12.
12-ish.
Round up. So only 12 of the schools actually had specific policies for students.
Now that was a year ago.
Correct.
It could be better now.
Fall of 2023.
Yeah, it could be better now.
Maybe.
From what I've seen, the numbers have, because I read another survey, the numbers have grown, but they have not grown leaps and bounds.
Something else that I think is this
is the part that I thought was the most interesting to you.
As districts navigate AI implementation, which is something we are doing, many leaders remain cautious. We know that. But a survey by a consulting firm earlier this year found that only a small fraction of superintendents considered AI an urgent need.
And what they said was, which you and I remember when I drove you nuts with our TCA presentation last February.
Why do they not consider it urgent? It's because they have other needs. They're up to their ass in alligators. And those alligators are things like teacher shortages, behavioral issues with students, student mental health, and absenteeism.
You were an assistant principal. Now you were, you're not the assistant principal now, but I don't think any of these problems have, if anything, they've gotten worse. They certainly haven't gotten better. But remember when I had asked you to change our presentation? What I used to tell the kids, when you're in a business world, if you can't draw a line between what you do and where the money's made, then you're probably going to get laid off at some point in the future. Well, in education, if you can't draw a line between whatever product, service, whatever you're offering to what they care about, which in most cases is high stakes testing. But you can take each one of those and draw a line to problems with the high stakes testing.
Well,
because any one of those will cause the test scores to go down.
Yes. Absenteeism.
The question then becomes, which we did in the professional development we do now, you do a pretty good job of drawing a line between how can AI help with these. Mm-hmm. Now, in another analysis that I did when I was doing one of those simulations I like to do, in some ways it was hard on some of these to draw a line between, what can AI do versus how is it directly going to impact these particular problems.
The number one thing I think that our teachers in our pilot program are using it to help with, that is, and they told me, I interviewed them last week, the student engagement, because it's asking the AI, how can I better engage a fourth grader? What is something fourth graders are interested in right now that I can tie this lesson back to, like real world connection? What are they doing outside of the classroom? Soccer, motorbike riding, all the things that they're interested in. If you can tie the lesson into their interest, they're going to learn more.
Now, if someone wants to bring us in to talk about it, because I'm not going to talk about it in our podcast, but the behavioral disruptions, worsening student mental health, we actually did a pilot program about 7 years ago where we picked one of the students that checked every box when it comes to mental health problems, comes to absenteeism, all of that stuff. And we saw a marked improvement in our pilot.
Absolutely.
Based on one particular thing we did, which I'm not going to give away. It's a secret, but one particular thing we did that I think could be implemented in lots of ways in school districts. But anyway, moving on. So
kids who use ChatGPT as a study assistant actually do worse on tests.
Now, I want to give you a caveat on this. The people who wrote this article said in the article that they put that title there because they wanted to get your attention. So it's not as cut and dry as you think.
So they did a study of 1,000 students from a Turkish high school over in Turkey. Mm-hmm. And they said that students who use ChatGPT for math practice could solve more problems correctly when they were actually practicing it. But then on the actual test, they scored 17% worse than those who did not use it for practice.
And again, without talking too much about what we're learning in our pilot program, but one of the things we've learned in our pilot program about you can't just do one phase of that. You can't just have that one aspect. Again, I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. If you want to know the rest of it, you can always have us come in. But at the same time, there is more to it than just the tutor.
Okay, so there is a product out there, and I won't say what it is, but there is a product out there that basically, I was watching a student use it the other day, and the student's standing there, and it's on their screen, and it asks them a question. And then if the student answers the question incorrectly, a thing pops up and says something like, well, no, that wasn't correct. Maybe you should think about, and it's kind of like guiding it. The student didn't even read what it was saying. It just clicked the next answer, knowing that eventually they would get it right.
I know. We saw the kids in our alternative behavior center. This was several years ago. It's just before AI stuff. They had a tool that they were using that was getting them high school credits. Now, we don't use this tool anymore because they found that the kids were using it wrong too much. But the kids figured out that they didn't get points off
if they did a wrong answer. So they would click.
It was, until it was right. It was multiple choice most of the time.
Right. So kids are going to game the system.
So there was one part I highlighted that I wanted you to pay attention to.
The errors in problem-solving approaches and arithmetic, as well as students' tendency to use it as a crutch,
which you talk about all the time,
rather than building their own skills, may have contributed to the negative impact of the learning.
That was one of the things they said was they wanted people to pay attention to that.
Well,
was that
if I have something that's going to help me, and I know it's going to help me get to the right answer if I give it the wrong answer the first time, I'm going to pick the wrong answer the first time, because then it's going to give me a clue as to what the right answer is.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, even if that's deliberate, even
kids are deliberate.
I know, but even less deliberate. Why does my mom not want to get in an electric wheelchair? She said that she's afraid to because if she gets in it, she's afraid she'll never get out, that it becomes too much. It helps her too much.
Okay.
The problem you have with a crutch is, and this is human nature. Human nature is to take the shortest path, the easiest path, path of least resistance. It's like a water flowing downhill. So what the problem is these kids are doing this and they're taking the path of, and nobody's there to pull the crutch out.
Right. Because
that's the problem.
The thing with me is I was standing behind the student. She didn't know I was standing there. And I saw her do that. And I was like, hey, wait a second, And so, the teacher still has to be very involved to make sure these kids are not just taking the shortcuts.
Okay. We're taking too long. We're going to run out of time because I wanted to.
How does AI get to schools? We choose what we think is a more cost-effective and growth-minded approach.
This is. I put this in here because this is what we chose to do.
Right.
We have been piloting for 2 decades. We created the Trailblazer program because we found the best way to find out what teachers want is to ask.
Right.
Now, I know that sounds weird, but because that's obvious, right? But most of what you get about this information is surveys. These are surveys that are people that they used to be in the classroom. They, former this and former that. That's not what we do.
Well, not just that, but the teacher, it gives you like, okay, A, B, C, or D. Well, you're going to pick the one that's the closest to what you're thinking or what you're feeling.
Yeah, and what you're thinking or feeling.
It's not open-ended. Versus the pilot program, we actually go in and we sit in the class and we observe the class and we don't judge what they're doing. We just sit there and take notes, or we get up and help out, or I
put those 4 points in there because that's what you do.
Yes.
And the problem, like when I go in there, they feel like they're being judged because I'm the technology director and they think I'm in there to monitor them, and I'm not. When you go in there, you help out.
Right.
So anyway, I think that it's important.
What I'm starting to do now is instead of going in and actually being in the classroom all the time, I love going over and yes, I'll bring them drinks or I'll bring them lunch or, whatever. And we sit in there and they make me cookies and we sit in there and we talk about what it is that they're doing and what it is that they're seeing and how it's affecting the engagement and what else they might want to see. So it really is just an open-ended conversation. So we're enjoying it.
I wanted to give you a second in there. So I put a little spot in our podcast tonight for you to talk about. Okay, we have the difficulties with adoption. We see that these are that there's problems. What about the business world? Business world always talks about how they do things faster. I'm not going to say who, but you went to a conference recently and they were introducing a product. What did they say about their adoption? And this was a business, private sector.
Well,
they had a very focused effort to get people to use this AI.
And they say that they are seeing a lot of what we're seeing. They have a very small group of people in the business that are the super users. They're the ones they are the early adopters. They jumped on board. They're using it all the time. Then they have that group that they're like dragging them along. And then they have the group that's like, nope, not going to do it. So it's very, very similar to what we're seeing in education. It's so
similar that if I didn't tell you one was the other, you wouldn't know the difference.
I would not.
That's my point.
I would not know the difference.
That's my point.
The two things that I did note very much so important is that they were saying the group that was in the middle, the early adopters were really doing a good job of cheerleading and like showing that how they were using it, why they were using it. They were trying to bring the other people on board, just like coaches, we're getting our trailblazers
instructional technology. Yes.
The ones in the middle, one professional development wasn't enough. They had to continually show them this is what it did. This is what it's good for. Here's another PD. Here's another training. Here's another thing, And so that middle group, they're starting to get more as they go. The other thing I thought was interesting is that they're not using a canned AI or an AI wrapper.
They got a custom solution.
They have a custom solution.
The AI itself may not be custom but they're customizing how they're using it, what it's used.
Right. And it's because of their return on investment, because of the number of people who are using it versus not.
They think it's important. So I kind of felt like I was making AI in a negative light. People aren't adopting it. People are slow to adopt it.
Kids are using it as a crutch.
Why is that bad? Why are we offering professional development with all this negativity? Because I believe, and I think you do too, that there is a huge potential for a paradigm shift.
Yes.
And for once, I see enormous potential in the growth of this. But one of the things we've got to stop doing so much of is doing stupid and bad things with it. I mean, I know, yes, that's human nature and it's always been true. We have an entire generation of kids that some of the best creative minds, which people call them millennials, I think. A lot of the millennials spent all their time trying to, they were hired to figure out how to get people to click on something, feed them ads, things they didn't want. This is not really that. It's not enhancing our lifestyle, our moving us forward as a human race. I think we've wasted a lot of energy on that. I read today that somebody in Pakistan used AI to generate a fake news thing claiming there was going to be a Halloween parade in a town in Ireland. And so everybody was ready for the parade, except it was fake. Why would you do that?
Because you're
a jerk. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that if we could stop doing so much, it's sad that we take something this powerful with this much potential and we need to improve it, but we need to be having these brilliant minds focused on that and not crap like that.
Yeah.
New technology is intimidating. I mean, that's why we pilot things, to see what people like, what they don't like, how they use it, how they don't use it. I could tell you a story, which you don't have time for, of why all of these interactive boards aren't what people think that we put into all these schools, because we piloted them.
Right.
We asked the teachers, we watched them, so on and so forth. Anyway, my hope is that this technology can give us a better interface. I talk about the elderly a lot. I talk about my mom. My next pilot is to start putting AI tools, assistants into my mom's house. Because we tried it with Alexa.
Awesome.
And my mom wants this stuff because she has so many things she can't do. And she doesn't understand the technology. We try to give her access to these online things like Netflix through Roku or these other tools. We can't find one she can use.
Right.
It confuses her.
It's
too complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, user interface, all these wonderful things. I know we're out of time, but I wanted to give a quick Agnes update, which is what we're rolling out in our Trailblazer program.
Yes, more features. We're putting some more features in there.
I turned on image generation in DALL-E, which I've had it on for a bit, but I turned it on. Yes. I put the right stuff in there. Because we have control over what the teachers, our own chat interface, we have control over what tools we give them and how much they cost. So we got the dashboard up and running. You're going to start introducing them to the dashboard so they can go to one spot and click on these different tools. We're going to add a video generation option into our dashboard. It's not going to be part of our chat bot. It'll be separate because most of them are. We're about to add our speech function. Lucy works. I'm about to add Lucy in so they can use. Lucy is the thing where it does transcription, text to speech to text, and then it translates it into whatever language you want. There's like 15 different languages.
Which is going to be great for like high school kids and stuff.
And it shows it on the kid's Chromebook. So the kid clicks on a link and it opens it in a window. So as the teacher's talking, it's putting in English in the left pane, and in the right pane, it's putting
whatever language.
And it's completely local. Mm-hmm. So it's not running in the cloud somewhere. It's completely local. So we're turning that on as well.
Yes.
I also wanted to mention that we're going to be talking at a conference this week.
Thursday. We're talking
twice on Thursday, right?
Yes. The System Administrator TCA conference.
We go every year. This is their second, third, fourth year. I don't know how many years we've went. This is only the second time we've spoken at it.
After that, we're doing the science conference, and then I'm doing a virtual conference.
The science conference is in San Antonio in December?
No, that's November.
Oh, it's in November
16th.
As well.
Yeah,
okay.
So we're doing all sorts of stuff.
I'm actually looking forward to that one. But anyway.
What's the very last thing? The silly thing.
This was silly. I didn't even put what it was because I wanted to make you click on it just because I wanted you to see what they're saying. Basically, remember the line from Casper, the Friendly Ghost?
Yes.
When they said smellogram and they like belched a green cloud on the guy and it smelled terrible. These guys can teleport scents. They got an AI they're using to discover. They're creating their own scents, like their own fragrances and stuff.
Yeah.
But they're creating it from scratch. But they claim they can teleport scents. I don't know how you do that.
Well,
they can turn words and images into fragrances. That's cool. Fragrances.
Yeah, you're having a speech.
Fragrances. I'm having a hard time with that word. Anyway, I just thought you'd find that cool. It's a smell. You can send a smellogram.
So you can say, hey, I need to send smelly fish to somebody.
This last line I put in there was for Rachel. I wanted you to see the story because You could tell me if it smelled a little fishy, or you could see if you had a good nose for stories. Right. Okay.
So my name is Maurie, and I'm here with my husband, Jim, and we hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.